going on, everybody? It's Rocket Rob 99 again. Today, giving tactical mortar tips for Battlefield 1. You can see my prior video on tactical mortars for Battlefield 4. But here, let's get right started here on how to use mortars in Battlefield 1. It is completely different than it was in Battlefield 4. Here in Battlefield 1, it takes a little bit more skill figuring out what angles and how to hit, your targets. Here, without having anybody using a spot flare, it's a lot more difficult to use mortars and get kills with them. But they do work in suppressing the enemy and holding enemies at bay, and you can use them to support your team to attack an objective. So when you're playing, you need to look at first, when is the best time to use your mortars in the support class? I mean, should you use it when you're attacking objectives or defending an objective? And that's really up to you to figure out which is the best way to go about that. Now, what I also do is I sometimes will use the mortars to irritate the enemy, in particularly snipers, which, if you saw my prior video, is kind of my thing with mortars and just being an annoyance to snipers in general. However, you can also use the high explosive mortars to get out entrenched players who are in buildings, in particularly, where you can do destruction on those buildings and open up those cover areas that the enemies may be using to defend a particular objective. This is an effective way to get also multiple kills if you have a lot of enemies inside of one building. Now, you also have to remember, as you use mortars, they are a suppressive gadget, and they do offer a lot of suppression. But you could also use them in close quarters combat, in other words, to hold enemies at bay from taking an objective. And this is in particularly true in operations when your flag is the last flag and masses of enemies are trying to move in on that flag to capture the sector. So when you're using mortars, you can use these effectively in close quarters if you know how to use the tactics behind them. So when you're looking at your objectives and where you're going to place your mortars, obviously you need to be in some proximity to the particular objective that you're defending or that you want to defend. And then make sure that you're out of general lines of sight of snipers, because as soon as you lay the mortar down, you are sniper bait. There is really no way to defend yourself against enemy players walking up on you or snipers picking you off from great distances. So you have to be conscious about where you place your mortar in relation to the objective you want to defend or attack. So when you're also thinking about that, what modes work best? Well, obviously, as in Battlefield 4, and Battlefield 3, using mortars on an objective in rush is really an important part. Whether you're attacking or defending, having a good mortarman, working the objective to keep the enemies off of a point until it can be captured, really can be a vital asset to your team. But when you're looking at how to use the mortars, you need to look at, where are the enemies going to be? Without having somebody with a spot flare, obviously if you're playing in Conquest or Operations, anywhere in close proximity to the flag is going to get you plenty of kills. Now my recommendation is not to just shoot off your mortar rounds right away, but to use intermittent fire and watch where the mortars rounds land and see what the enemies look like within that area, and you have to decide whether you want to bring in another mortar strike on that particular spot. Now, there's always been the debate about high explosives versus airburst round. I find it to be more effective with the high explosive as opposed to the airburst. And the high explosive gives you the ability to attack and if you're lucky enough, defeat an enemy vehicle, even a tank. As you saw in that last clip there, I took down a land ship with a mortar. And then, when they're on the flag with, any type of vehicle, high explosive rounds in on that flag will allow your team to maybe defend that particular point, or you can take out that vehicle that is, which raping your team. So when you're choosing, if you have any kind of map where there's vehicles and you know that there's a good chance that you're going to be engaging vehicles, it's a good idea to use the high explosive rounds. Now, when you're dealing with infantry combat, a lot of people will say, and of course the stats show that using the airburst mortar is the way to go. However, it's really, I think, in the long run, a preference issue. It's how you want to play with that particular gadget. I am more successful with the high explosive rounds, but it doesn't mean that I can't get kills with the airburst mortars. When you're dealing with heavy infantry maps, and then you'll notice almost all of these clips are infantry style open world maps, you get a lot more suppressive ability by using the airburst mortar. And when you're dealing with enemy teams coming over a hillside and you're just trying to keep them back the best as you can, that's a good place to use them. I hope you enjoyed this video and the tips that I offered here, and hope that it helps you increase your fun of using mortars. Till next time, this is Rocket Rob, and I'll see you all out on the battlefield.